Welkom allemaal. Mijn naam is Gerrit. Die daarvan ziet dat ik ga vanavond iets vertellen over ja, een beetje aansluitend eigenlijk op wat Mike Davis net heeft verteld. Je hebt die app gebouwd en dan wil je die gaan uitbrengen. Ik ga ervan uit dat de meesten van jullie wel gehoord hebben van wat het continuous integration en continuous delivery. Daar ga ik het vanavond over hebben. Iemand die niet weet waar ik over heb dan. Helemaal goed. Dan gaat er ook niet van hier vanavond. Mijn naam is Gerrit Sluis. Hier staan een aantal contactmogelijkheden, dus gebruik die ook vooral. Ik werk natuurlijk bij Format, zoals duidelijk mogelijk is. Daar ben ik consultant en ja, ik richt mij voornamelijk op Xamarin achterzaken. Of course. So, my name is Gerrit Sluis, and I work at Format, of course, where I am a consultant, and I don't always work with Xamarin apps, but I try to focus on it. But I also like to do other stuff, like Azure and kind of new stuff. And, I'm going to do that, and then I create half a project. So basically, what any good developer does. I'm a Xamarin certified developer, so I should know what I'm talking about. I'm also a Microsoft MVP because I talk a lot and go out a lot, and they say, okay, you're doing a great job, so you're happy, you know. And if there are any questions, like the gentleman in the back, then just raise your hand and I'll try to jump into it. And if it's a longer question, then just walk up to me afterwards and I'll be happy to answer that. So, continuous integration and delivery. It shouldn't be really a new concept for you, I hope. But this session is focused on mobile apps, especially Xamarin apps. So it has a few quirks and a few things to think about extra, and we'll look at it. So this is what I have. First, a little bit about DevOps. We'll see the elephant again, as drawn by Microsoft, and then I'll first focus on continuous integration. We'll look at a bit of VSTS. Who here works with VSTS? Then we'll see a bit of continuous delivery, also with VSTS, not the new editor. I didn't get around to playing with that, so not good to do that with a live demo here. And then we'll have a look at some alternatives, the mobile center that Mike James already talked about. And that's all. So this is the elephant I was talking about. Microsoft has presented this, and it's went like, okay, DevOps, it's kind of a global term, so what do people mean by it? And one could say, okay, I'm a DevOps engineer, so what is that? Or it's a job title. And other people are like, we're doing DevOps to just use the buzzword and get more customers to do business with them. And the problem is that no one really has the big picture of what DevOps is. So Microsoft put a lot of effort in it, or well, especially Jonathan Brown has put a lot of effort in it to construct this sentence, this definition of what is DevOps. And it took him 30 days to write this. Not because he's not a smart guy, he's a really smart guy. But he took 30 days to write this sentence, so he could defend every word that's in here. He has really weighed every word like, okay, it's the meaning of people, processes, and products, not tools, it's products, and to enable continuous delivery of value to the users. I think this is a pretty accurate definition. The app I will be demoing with, actually we won't see much of the app, but I still want to advertise it, is the BinPwned app. Actually, Glenn's here. I worked on it with him a little bit. And some other guy. I actually have a version of this in the App Store right now for Android and iOS built with Xamarin 4. And what it does is uses the Have I Been Pwned API from Troy Hunt. So you can search in here if your account has been compromised with the Adobe or the LinkedIn hack or whatever, you can see if your data has been compromised. And if you add your email address here, I will have it as well, so it will be compromised again. And no, that's not. So that's, but I actually got that question a lot. So that's why I decided, like, okay, I need a cool new app to demo with, and I will open source it so everyone can see I'm not doing anything funny in there. So that's the app I've been using. Why is quality of mobile products? Well, here's a couple of things. The funny thing is, I hope as a developer you know that developing itself isn't always easy. Developing for mobile is even harder most of the time. And here's why. First, device fragmentation, because you have lots and lots of types of devices. iOS is kind of simple, but they're going to like diversify a lot more now as well with the iPhone 8, 7, iPhone X with the weird notch in it. What the hell is that? So there's a lot of that going on as well. And then there's Android. Oh my god. With the Android fans? Oh, I thought we could be friends. So I'm not really a fan of Android. I hope it's not too much. But Android is, I mean, every Chinaman has opened his own shop and created like his own Android phone. So there's like millions of resolutions and devices and sensors and I don't know. Then there's app complexity. A lot of customers tend to think like, hey, it's an app, it's just small, so maybe they think like, okay, an app is not hard to build because it's small, right? So it shouldn't be a lot of work. But it is. We'll see a little bit of that a little bit in a few slides over. You'll have to have fast release cycles, especially if you're not the only app out there that does the same thing. So you want to deliver new value to your customers as soon as possible. So you want to have that app like updating every week, every 2 weeks, a quick cycle. And people are using it for short sessions. Like Mike, he tried to come in here with an Uber, and you check the Uber app, oh, there's not one here. Okay, boom, then it's gone. So you have to, your app has to start up within seconds. You have to get your data, and people are out. So you have to account for that kind of scenarios where people just come in only for a few seconds, and you have to show them data immediately. Because if it doesn't, then your app will just be killed and maybe uninstalled, because that's what the next point is saying. You have high mobile user expectations, because there are a lot of good apps out there. So people are very critical on what apps they will install, what apps they will use. Here's a little bit of a device fragmentation, and this is actually an old slide because there's new devices now. But if you take for iOS, you do 5 times 20 times 20 times 35 times 6, that's how many devices you should test if you want to have all sorts of configuration. And for Android, it's madness. I mean, you have 19,000 distinct devices alone. And this is an old slide, there's more now. Oh, not so much. And this is why, this is all, well, not even all, but this is a typical app architecture. And, well, you have thousands of APIs already. Mike told you this, there's like, I think it was 33,000 or 40,000 APIs for iOS and Android. So there's lots of APIs to use, and you have to pick the right one. Then there's public web APIs, or you can have your private, doesn't really matter. But you have to account for scenarios where your app is not connected. I mean, there's no such thing as a stable 4G connection, so you have to take into account that the connection can drop. And Akabachi is a really good package for that, which Mike also mentioned. So your user thinks it's looking at data because it's cached, and they think like, oh, it's snappy. And then in the background, you're reloading, trying to reload, and you show the data to the user, and they're like, oh, this is working great. But if you have just a desktop application, you have much more control over is there an internet connection, yes, no, than a device which can at any point go into a tunnel or whatever and lose its connection. Also, if I'm talking about an app, there's always a backend, so that's also the API, and you have a lot of backend integrations, like for instance the Azure backend and Cosmos DB, and there's all these kinds of stuff that go wrong there. So that's also adds to the complexity of an app. And then you're using probably a lot of third-party libraries, because there's a lot of good stuff out there. But if it doesn't respond the way you want, yeah, what you're going to do? Not a lot of people are going to go out on GitHub. Well, they're going to go out on GitHub, and then they raise an issue and come back every week and say, hey, why isn't this fixed yet? Instead of just fixing it yourself. I'm not. So third-party libraries, you're relying on that there as well. So that adds to the complexity as well. And then there's the limited memory, CPU, that kind of stuff. I mean, iPhones now are more powerful than the computer that you had at home 20 years ago, probably. But still, in comparison to desktop applications, your memory and your CPU is very limited. So you have to account for that as well. You can't just go in and load these huge profile images that everyone likes to put up, and then your app's going to be still very fast, especially in Xamarin. So, how does this relate to wanting DevOps? I have to move a bit quickly. I'm trying to run about this. You want to increase quality because of constant feedback. You're going to increase quality because if you just set up simple continuous integration, you will have feedback automatically about is your code building other than on my machine. So you get rid of the it works on my machine. So that's a big plus right then and there. And there's more to add there, but that's just the beginning. It's easy to set up. You can do it in literally a minute. So I don't see why you should. With that, you can reduce your technical debt easier because you go through cycles faster. You can get rid of old code and just move along from there, which accelerates your development and release, which I already talked about. You can, if you set it up from start to end, you can just release your app with one click. And I don't mean the right-click deploy. Then don't let friends use right-click deploy. So don't do that. And with that, because you can go faster, you can increase innovation because you can just think, okay, this feature I wanted to add last week, but now my competitor is adding this feature as well, and I want to do something different, or I want to use a similar feature as well. And you can just decide on that, start working on it, and release it within a week without going through all kinds of manual hoops, which improves agility and no more for field deployment because you go through different phases if you have set it up right. And the deployment will be repeatable, so you test it every now and again. And if it fails, you know you have to look at either your code or your deployment process and fix one of both. And well, that you can repeat the deployments everywhere. So this is what it should look like eventually. There, on the left, you're the awesome developer, you're working, and you check your code in, or I have to say commit now because we're using Git, into VSTS or GitHub or whatever. And from there, you can trigger automatically your continuous integration, which can contain your unit tests, and it can also contain Xamarin Test Cloud, which might change. If you don't know Test Cloud, it's pretty awesome. I'll show it maybe to you briefly if I've got time, which is actually a coded UI test cloud, and you can test your application on actual physical devices. Xamarin has created some warehouse, I think, in Denmark, and they have actual physical devices there hooked up to a wall, or that's how they like to visualize it, probably some old warehouse and dust and spiders. And they're all plugged into this big system they've created, and you can run your automated UI script provided with it, and then it will be ran on an actual physical device of your choice with the actual limitations of the actual device, and you can that way test your application on thousands of devices without actually having to own it. So it's a pretty powerful thing, also very expensive, so that should be noted. And if that all goes well, then you go to HockeyApp, which will be mobile centered in the near future. And from there you can distribute it to your users as testers, which can be users within your company, or if you're creating a consumer app, you want to probably maybe test out in the open and have consumers test with it and provide you with feedback. And if that all goes well, you can just click a button and it will deploy to the actual app stores. Okay, continuous integration, a bit zooming in. So as a developer, you want feedback on your code ASAP. Even if you're a single developer, you're going to want it, at least I do. Because you want to know if your code integrates with other developers. If you're a single developer, that doesn't really matter, but still you want to know if your code builds not just on my machine. Because especially in the time when you were not using Git, I don't know about you, but files were not added to the source control every now and again. and you would only find out if your computer was formatted and you lost a lot of code, and then you were like, shit, now what? And you can prevent with doing this. Just set up continuous integration, and you will, within seconds, you will know if you didn't forget, or if you did forget to check in a file, commit, and that kind of stupid trivial thing. And also, you can integrate your unit tests, other kind of tests if you have them, but they have to, of course, be small and running fast, so you can get feedback easily. Microsoft has everything now to accommodate for this. They have VSTS, they already had it in the form of TFS, which is the on-premise now, and now they also have the VSTS environment, which is basically TFS, but now as a hosted in Azure, so you can use it as a service. And it's free for up to 5 users, unlimited private repositories, so it's pretty awesome. They have also bought Xamarin, so they have everything. They were like, okay, Windows Phone is not happening, so we have to buy everything else, so they did. And they have also bought, even before that, they bought HockeyApp, and they created application insights, which are kind of similar services. Well, HockeyApp is also distribution, but it does also collect credit reports and analytics from your app, just like application insights. And HockeyApp was very known to incorporate gathering analytics as well as distributing test versions of your app out of the app stores. And of course, Test Cloud, which I already mentioned what it is. And they're going to bring this together inside Mobile Center, which I will show in a little bit. VSTS is awesome. It doesn't just store your code, but it can also create these builds for you. And it has a lot more than that. You can also store your test scenarios in there. You can create Kanban, sprint boards, and that kind of stuff, and create work items that do everything you want to. And it's now even extensible to a marketplace. They've introduced a marketplace where everyone can create extensions, even paid, so if you want to make money that way, you can. And with that, everyone can add to VSTS and extend it and add all kind of awesome functionality. And because it's as a service, the same Jonathan Brown, I've seen him speaking a couple of months ago. He was doing a tour through Europe. And he talked about how VSTS is continuous integration and delivery itself, so it's like continuous integration and delivery section. And they have this release cycle of every 3 weeks now, so just imagine VSTS is like a massive product, and every 3 weeks they've managed to get it up to 3 weeks that they release a new version. Which is great for us, but not so much if you're writing a book, so screenshots just get old really fast. But they forgot one thing, they forgot to add a Mac, because Apple has a requirement, not even by their hardware, but in their license, that if you're building an iOS app, you have to compile it on Mac hardware. So this is kind of a problem, and actual hardware, not virtualized, right? You have to buy actually Mac hardware. So they probably, in VSTS there's not a Mac now, so you can supply your own, and the cheapest possibility is probably to buy a Mac Mini, like it's sitting on my desk right here. And it does nothing more than just sit there and wait for requests from VSTS, like, hey, is there any code to build? Okay. So it's like a really, really expensive build agent. Another option would be to go to Mac in Cloud, which is a service that provides you with basically this, but they have a lot of magnets stacked on each other, and they provide them as a service. So let's have a look at how this all looks. So this is the GitHub repository for the app, which is private now, so don't go out immediately. And here is my VSTS account. So this is kind of interesting because this is hosted on GitHub, so I'm not going to actually use VSTS for hosting the code right now. But I am going to use it building my code. So what I have to do, I have to build a new project because they didn't see this kind of functionality coming, so it's not really built for this. And I'll call the project info with Git, of course, and the work item process doesn't really matter because I'm not going to use it. But here you can specify which work item process you want to use. There's Agile, Scrum in here, and you can even add your own template if you want to. Hopefully I'm not going to have the same problems. It's going to be a very quick session. So, Trump, huh? Ah, there it is. Well, not finished yet. But so here you get the team project. In VSTS, we call a team project. And it consists of dashboards that you can create. You can store your code, you can create work items, build and release is what we're interested in now. You can create your test plans and even wikis because no one ever maintains them, so that's good. And here you can initialize your Git repository if you want to. But let's go into build and release right now. Build. And in the builds, you can create build definitions. So let's do that now. And like Microsoft does, you get presented with a whole lot of templates. So you can get out of the box a lot of templates which are already there for creating a desktop or for building a desktop application or ASP.NET, but also even for Android or Azure Cloud Services. And this does nothing more than provide you with a couple of steps already. So there should be some Xamarin apps in here as well. Don't get confused. Xamarin apps don't deliver Xamarin apps. You still have to have a separate iOS and Android application at the end of the day because your iOS device does not understand the Xamarin Forms application. It still gets compiled to an iOS and an Android application separately. Xamarin Forms is only a framework that helps you unify the UI. And again. So if we look at the Xamarin iOS application, I'll just switch over to this template, and you'll see that there's actually build steps in here already. Well, let me just quickly get into something else. Which I already downloaded is the build agent right here, because they don't provide you with Mac hardware, so I have to provide it on my own. So I downloaded the build agent right here, and you can just configure it by saying, okay, it's connected to this VSTS account, and this is using the password, and then it will automatically understand to connect to the right one, which obviously will also take long, but it will connect eventually. And then it will just sit here waiting for requests to build the web application. And because it's Android, you can also automatically build Android applications on there as well. If you have the free VSTS account, you will get 240 minutes build minutes for free, so you can use 240 minutes for building. After that, it just stops, so you can pay more to get more minutes. But you get around this, you can get around this or get off of it by using this build agent, because you're not using any computing power from Azure, so you're using your own machine, which will not eat into your 3 minutes there. Yeah. No, a month, sorry. Yeah. Yes, here it is. Okay, awesome. Should have prepared screenshots for this. Okay, here it is. So this is a build definition. At the left side, you can see all the steps that are in this build definition. So it will go through all these steps to create a build for you. This can be anything. There's a lot of steps already in here, but you can also extend it yourself or get some from the marketplace or whatever. And of course, it will start with getting sources from GitHub in this scenario. So just create it now. Should be authenticated. So it will create a new GitHub connection, and it will say, okay, which repository or what link. Let's use mine. And the master branch. And here's some old legacy step that shouldn't be here. It's restore Xamarin components, which is dying hopefully. And here's what it's really about. So you see, whenever I go through the steps on the right side, you will see configuration options that are associated with this step. And obviously, when you're building, you want to know which solution to build and which configuration. If you see some dollar signs and parameters, it uses parameters, which can specify when you start building or at command line or whatever. In this case, I'm going to use the iOS simulator, so I'm sure it will work. Because if you want to build an actual iOS app, you have to do all this juggling around with certificates from developer portal from Apple, and it's a real pain to go through, but you have to do it. And so you have to specify these certificates, of course, here, or where to find them, or you can use the identifiers as well. This is really something you should look out for, and also on Android, it works with a key store. So you need either to put these certificates into your code repository, or provide some build steps to load them from a remote location where you store them safely. But this is really the most painful thing in this whole app build process. So here we already see a step for test cloud, so we can get the created binaries and send them over to test cloud if we want to. Which I would not recommend if you're using just a continuous integration build, because you want feedback fast, and test cloud is awesome, but it's not very fast. Because it's physical devices, so they have a limited set of devices. And if you're the third in line, you just have to wait for someone else's test to also finish. You move up one slot and wait for everyone else to go first. So we're not going to do this. Let's just move for now. And here we can then copy the artifacts. The binaries that you create in continuous integration land are known as artifacts. So this can be one or multiple files that are delivered to, well, a shared folder or back to the VSTS server for use with the continuous delivery. So then you can say, okay, this is my FIFA file, which is the equivalent of the .exe. And you can use that binary and send it over to you on the actual web. So, but we're not going to do this. And here you have to choose the agent queue. If you're using the free minutes, you can just choose a hosted one, or you can build on Linux these days, or especially a hosted VM with PS 2017 on it. There is some MSDN page on this, because if you're using hosted builds, there's a specific tool set installed for you. So you probably want to know, is my tool set on there, and can I build on this hosted machine? Because basically what this does is spin up a VM in Azure, build your code, and then tear it down. So it will create it each time. But you want to know what kind of tools are on there, and basically if you want to build any .NET project, you can get away with doing a hosted one. In this case, I have to do the default, and let's just save it for now. Because I have to use my own NAT hardware. And the way I do this is go into the settings and have a look at the agent pool, because you can create pools of agents if you want to. And here you can see it's my to download the agent, it tells you how to do here. So it's not very hard, but you have to do it. And it's green and it's idle, so it should be able to build my application. So let's do that. Sorry, I'm going to cancel here for a minute. What you can do is use variables here, the ones I said with the dollar sign in front of them. You can define them here for usage for passwords that you need to insert in configuration or something. And then you can say, okay, I have this value, I'm not doing a my case here. And you can say, okay, this is a sensitive value, so you can click the lock and it will become unreadable for anyone, but you can still use it inside your certificate to sign your application, that kind of thing. You can also go here for triggers. If you want to set up a continuous integration build, you can say, okay, I want a continuous integration build. And because we're using GitHub now, it's actually installing a webhook in GitHub, and you can say, okay, whenever a PR happens or a special branch gets in commit, I want to build it before someone can go further. So it's actually from GitHub, which is pretty nice. Oh, here the pull request is an extra option. And you can also do scheduled builds. So if you want to do nightly builds and run your test, you can say, okay, I want to do a scheduled build, and you can say, I want to do it on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, because I just love those days, and I want to do it at this time. So you can configure this whatever you want. You can also, of course, you probably want to create different build definitions for different scenarios. And then there's some other options I won't go into detail here. Let's change this and queue an actual build. With the debug configuration, I was going to start complaining about not having any certificate. And you can actually see here, if you go in here, you can see the console output of our build agent. And it's receiving updates now. And it's failing immediately, so that's pretty good. But you can see here that it's actually using my build agent here, and it says, okay, it's failed. But you can actually see it's communicating with my build agent here. And what I call successful build and convince you that I actually know what I'm talking about. You can find the solution file in this folder. This is actually a lesson learned. You don't do it right the first try. You have to do a couple of red bars here before you get the right one. But here you see all kinds of things, so it's going to fill again. All kinds of stuff going on. This is actually precisely the output that you will get from Visual Studio when you're actually doing the actual stuff. So this helps fixing your process as well, because you can just simulate. You should be able to simulate it on your local computer. Just set your Visual Studio to the right configuration as well, and it should fail as well. So I forgot to restore the NuGet package now, and you probably did. I wrote a book about it, I know that. So, now that we've successfully continuously integrated, it's time for continuous delivery. Also known as continuous deployment, but for apps it's not really deployment, because deployment would be like your web application, putting it on a server and proving that you can replicate that deployment every time. And for your app, it's just basically you put it in the App Store and you're not actually deploying it on a server. So, well, it kind of means the same thing with a little UX. But as a developer, you still want to use continuous delivery also. Because again, you will get early feedback. You will get feedback from trying to set it to HockeyApp, and then if it doesn't run or whatever, or it doesn't get accepted because you forgot to set an icon or So that's where you exactly get. And it's also very visible to end users or management. So they have an actual version they can hold, and they can see, okay, it's actually making progress, maybe slowly, but you can see new versions coming in and people are actually working. So that can be pretty valuable as well. And you'll have earlier benefits because you can push out those new features very quickly, maybe even faster than competitors. So you'll see the benefits of that earlier. And you can quickly respond to change. What I said before, you can just decide, okay, this feature is no longer important, I'm now going to focus on this. And you can very fast bring that to the App Store instead of having to create the binary yourself and go through the hassle with certificates and that kind of stuff, which helps your innovation. However, it doesn't mean that you have to deliver or deploy every build that you do, because when I started with this stuff, I was like, okay, this is awesome. I can now have continuous integration and it builds every time. So I was going through the 3 minutes, like a crazy one. So then I had to wait a month to go but then I got into the continuous delivery, and with HockeyApp, and every build now produced also a test version, which is nice if you're working alone and you have like, okay, at the end of the day, I commit, and then I get a new version, awesome, I told my girlfriend, she's like me. But if you start working in a team, then this gets annoying pretty fast, because if you're working with 3 guys who create small commits, as you should, and you're creating 5 commits, each person every day, you get like 15 versions on your phone, and you're like, okay, I know this now. I don't want to have every test version available, so you have to have some kind of triggers. If you're working with Git, again, put it on one branch, only the master branch, and just work from there. So what you need the app, you need continuous integration, because continuous delivery without integration doesn't really make sense. You could just right-click and deploy, have the binary, and then what? You're going to put it into VSTS and let it continue to deliver from there. It doesn't make any sense. It just takes power out of it. So it's a logical continuation of continuous integration. And HockeyApp, which will be mobile center in the near future. And if you want to go as far to take it to the actual app stores, you will need the App Store and the Play Store and the Marketplace if you use Windows. And in VSTS we have also release definitions. That's for the delivery part, which are actually similar or exactly the same as the build definitions. You can use the actual, say, steps to create a build definition as a release definition. So you could also just skip release definitions and do everything in your build, or the other way around. But release definitions have one extra, and that's environment. So you can specify separate environments, which will probably be your test, your production, and that kind of environments. Normally, again, when you're talking about web apps, that would be your test server, your acceptance test server, and your production server, and it will roll through these servers. But here it will probably be like HockeyApp and the App Store. Maybe that's it. And then in HockeyApp you can specify certain test groups. So you can say, okay, I want to roll it out to the HockeyApp developer group first. So we get the first version, and if we say, okay, it's fine, then it's literally just to click, okay, it's fine, and it will roll out automatically with the same definition that we specified before. It will roll out to the next environment, which will be the HockeyApp management group, and they will have the same application as you have, exactly the same binary. They can test with it, and if they say, okay, I want to sign off on this version, it will automatically roll out to the App Store if you want to. No technical expertise needed. They just have to click a link in an email, literally, and it will roll out to the next version. So that's very powerful stuff. I would show it to you, but I think I'm a bit short on time, so I'm going to skip it for now. Then there's HockeyApp. I think Mark James earlier asked who used it and who liked using it. I don't really like using it because it looks kind of old and it's not being maintained right now because, well, it's all going to be in Mobile Center eventually. So it's not really actively maintained, I think. But you can use it to distribute your versions to Windows, iOS, and Android. So you can put your binary there and specify test group users, and it will send invites to them and set up their account, that kind of stuff. If you want to test iOS applications outside of the App Store, you have to gather the unique device ID, put it in the profile in the Developer Center, then create a new binary with that profile and send a new test version before that user can use this actual version to follow you. Apple's great, but they tend to have these long processes that don't really make sense. On Android, it's just, here's the APK, install it, fine. And with iOS, you have to first gather the unique device ID, create a new build with that, and then they can use the solution. So remember that if you're going to do that, you're going to have to gather the device IDs and create a build for each new device that you want to have. But you get a lot in return. You get symbolic crash reports. So whenever a crash happens, you will get the full stack trace if you provided the symbol, and it will make it a lot easier to find any bugs or errors in your system. Like I already mentioned, you can specify different target groups, so you can target groups very specifically. And there's no waiting for the review processes. Actually, that's not really relevant anymore because this was also for Apple. They are the only ones, I think, that are manually testing every version and going through like, okay, click here, does it do what it should, and that kind of stuff. But I think they've hired a bunch of new people, and the process times are now back from a week or maybe 2 weeks even to usually a day, so it's not really an advantage anymore. Let's have a look. I don't think so. So what are the alternatives? I actually really wanted to show you Mobile Center. But this is going to be not the next step for continuous integration and delivery, but it's going to be a first release. Mobile, here it is. So I've actually set up the Dinpo app with Mobile Center. And Mobile Center uses VSTS on the different, so at least for building stuff. Mobile Center is going to be the control center for everything that has to do with mobile. So this is going to be has integrated builds. It will have integrated HockeyApp. It will have integrated test cloud, and probably it will get some other naming as well. Because if you go into a definition here, you don't have the team projects, but you more have a app definition. And you can add a new one here if you want to. There's an app name, and for which OS and platform you're using. And what this does under the hood is create a very complete template of what I just did in VSTS, but it will do it for you. And not right now, but in the future, there will be a button like, okay, I'm not noob anymore, I want to go to the advanced course. So you would say, okay, I want this app to build in VSTS right now. This will take a bit of generation, and then you will go to VSTS with everything it does in Mobile Center, and you can take it from there and add more advanced things to it. So let's have a look at the iOS app here. If you go into the apps, you see here on the left a couple of options that you have in Mobile Center, which is first build, which is the thing we've just seen. Test will be the test cloud thing. Distribute is going to be HockeyApp, and also crashing analytics will also be coming from HockeyApp, and Xamarin have their own solutions for this as well, so that's all going to be integrated in here. And then there's the solution for push notifications. I actually got a question about that right here, just before the session. I didn't use it myself from here, but they tend to have pretty good explanations here, so I'm not sure where you guys are sitting, but I think this might be a great starting point if you're just getting into push notifications. This would be a great starting point. So if you look at the builds here, it's literally, you can just say, okay, I want to build this iOS app from this GitHub repository and go, and it will do it. And there's Mac included in here. You don't have to provide your own Mac here. So this will just build, even if you don't have a Mac yourself. So that's great. And this is going to be, it's still in preview now, so it has a bit of some quirks and not everything feels as complete as it should. But whenever you run a build, you can also say automatically, configure this build. This is literally everything you have to configure here. You can also here choose to sign your builds, and you have to upload the certificate as well. But you can also say, okay, I want to test on a real device, and this is where Test Cloud is integrated, and it will just start your app like, okay, my app. I distinctly remember that I put out an app, and I think our CEO at Fortinet, he tried it out, and he was the first one to send me a message like, hey, nice app. It was on a Windows phone. He was the only one using Windows phone. And he texted me right within minutes, like, okay, great app, but it's crashing immediately. Shit. So this is something that you can connect with. And you can also distribute it right from here. You can also create the groups and that kind of stuff, and just create send the build from here to test users. And also to stores, I see. Oh, this is added. So they're also growing and integrating with the actual app stores to make a complete experience as possible. That's great. Continue to Test Cloud, which is really a great service. Very expensive again, but it's really great. I don't have the actual Bitcode app in here. We should write some tests for it, but let's take another one. You can see this run from March 8th, which is very recently. And you can just go in here and see, okay, I've written this test. This application calculates how much tip you have to give at the coffee shop. And this one is a test scenario for when I'm at the Starbucks. And here you see steps. I run the app. I enter €5. Then I toggle Starbucks. And the total should be something like this. And you can actually see when I'm going through the steps here, it's a bit hard to see. Let me see if I can do it. You can see that when I'm going through each step, it will take a screenshot of all the steps that you're going through. So you can actually see remotely what is going on and what's on the screen, what the user sees for every device that you choose. And here you see a field test. So here you can see, okay, I'm going through here, okay, this is fine. And here's where it's going wrong. And if you have multiple devices and it goes good on one device and wrong on the other, you see the bold just for that device. And you can click on it and see what the memory usage was, the CPU usage, full loss, that kind of stuff. So this is a really powerful tool to test on that little UOI I've never heard of code which has the bug that I can't duplicate. This is where you can get some more info, hopefully. And actually, this is really powerful because there's this one app that I did really I just got the iPhone 6, which was bigger, so it was nice, and I created this app, and it had a nice login button at the bottom, which looked fine on my iPhone 6, so we wrote a couple of tests, which we also ran on the iPhone 4 and 5, and on the iPhone 4 and 5, it failed. So we were like, why? And actually what we forgot was to add a scroll ability, so it couldn't scroll down to the button, so the user was not able to click the button if they would download it on a smaller form factor than on the iPhone 6. And it even detects that the user cannot click that button, so they will be stuck on that screen. So it's very powerful stuff. Also, this, of course, has great Azure integration. So you can use some Azure table storage behind this, and there's all kinds of stuff that you want to check out here. I think their example would be Bitwise, because this looks very similar to mobile setup, but just the build stuff. And they also provide a Mac, so if you want to create builds for your iOS applications, this is also a free alternative that you could look at. But it only does builds, and they also have some kind of marketplace, which is very extensible as well. But it has some more limited, it has fewer minutes than the VSTS builds. As an alternative for Test Cloud, you have Test Fairy, which doesn't use physical devices. I actual app stores for testing, they all have this beta kind of program. For iOS, you will go through TestFlight, which is like another app store on your phone, but just for test versions. And you have to invite actual users. I don't think they're actually extending it now, so maybe I'm saying things that aren't true anymore, but you have to invite actual people. So you don't get to organize some open beta and just say, okay, test my app and I'll hear whatever you think about it. You have to actually invite certain people to test the version. But the great advantage is that you can go right from production from here. You can just say, okay, the test went well, so go to production from here. But also, you can do that now from other stores like HockeyApp. If you want to beta test through TestFlight, you also have to go through the review process when you put out a test version. And then when you go to production, they say, oh, I don't mind about the test review process. We're just going to review it again. So you can actually wait for days again before they review it again. They don't have, I think that's improved now. The feedback collection, you can gather some feedback through TestCloud now as well. But there's no real user statistics, I think. So you can see how your test version is doing, how much is downloaded, and that kind of stuff. But you know, it's really invited. For the Play Store, there's similar. They have some more abilities like A/B testing, so you can roll out to this percentage of users your test version without them really knowing. So you can just start testing like that. And the only thing I find confusing is that it goes through the normal Play Store. So if I give you a test version, you would go to the regular Play Store and install that version. And if you want to go back to the production version for whatever reason, it's very hard to do. So your end users, if they're not very technical, it's a bit hard to explain like, hey, no, you're on a test version, and if you want to go back, you have to, I don't know, stand on your hands, wait for a full view. So that's all I have for you today. Maybe in time. Again, if you want to know something, reach out. There's my blog. I tend to blog on Xamarin on a not very regular basis, so but there are some posts on there. Well, as already noted, I wrote a book about all this, so if you want to read it at home, I think you can get it right here, and I will sign it for you if you want to. And I actually did another book, which is coming out in December 2017, which is about writing your very first Xamarin Forms application. So I hope you like the first book if you take it tonight, and if you do, let me know in the first place, and I hope you will look out for my second book as well. So thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoyed the session.